I still remember the exact sound the plate made when it smashed against the wall. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp enough to slice through my chest. That was the night my marriage officially died, even though the paperwork came years later. My name is Dorothy Wilson. I'm 83 years old now, and I've carried this story inside me for most of my life. Some memories don't fade with time. They age with you. They sit heavier in your bones every year. Before I go any further, let me say this. If you're listening to me right now, wherever you are in the world, thank you. And if my story hits home, don't be shy about sticking around. Stories like mine don't get told often enough. I was born in Millerville, Virginia, back in 1942. Tiny town, one main street. Everybody knew everybody's business, whether you liked it or not. My father, Henry, owned a modest grocery store. Nothing fancy, just honest work and long hours. My mother, Helen, stitched dresses for the richer families in town. Fingers always sore, but spirit never broken. We didn't have money, but we had values, respect, hard work, loyalty. Our house was small but spotless. Every morning smelled like fresh coffee and soap. Every night ended with tired smiles and quiet prayers. Looking back now, that was real wealth. I had one sister, Beatrice, 2 years younger, and Lord, she knew she was beautiful. Blonde hair, green eyes, the kind of face people remembered. Me, I was the smart one. Dark hair, olive skin, always buried in books. Teachers loved me. Boys barely noticed me. And that was fine, or so I told myself. In the 1950s, pretty girls married well. The rest of us learned survival skills. At 16, I started helping my dad at the store after school. That's where I first noticed the Harrison family. They owned the biggest dairy factory in the county. Rich, polished, untouchable. Mrs. Harrison never made eye contact. Gloves on her hands, even in summer heat, like she was allergic to regular people. Their son, James Harrison, only came to town during holidays. New York educated, sharp suits, polished smile. I barely registered his existence until the 4th of July, 1959. That night, the town square was alive. Music, fireworks, hot dogs, laughter floating through the air. I wore a simple dress my mother had sewn. Took me all afternoon to curl my hair. For once, I felt free. That's when I noticed him watching me. James, tall, confident, expensive suit. And then he smiled. Not the fake kind, the kind that makes your stomach flip for reasons you can't explain. He walked over. We talked for hours. Books, music, dreams. He listened, really listened, like my thoughts actually mattered. No one had ever done that before. "You're different, Dorothy," he told me softly. "You've got depth." And just like that, I was gone. I knew it was dangerous. I knew his world wasn't meant for someone like me. But at 19, logic doesn't stand a chance against hope. And that night, standing under fireworks, believing in something impossible, I had no idea I was stepping straight into the most painful chapter of my life. I thought falling in love was the miracle. I didn't know the real miracle would be surviving what came next. After that 4th of July night, James didn't disappear back into his shiny New York life like I expected. Nope, he stayed. And somehow, quietly, he chose me. At first, it was small things. A note slipped into my dad's grocery bag, a quick wave from across the street that felt way too intimate for a town like Millerville. Then came the late evening walks, always careful, always out of sight. James had a reputation to protect, and I had a heart already halfway off the cliff. We met behind the old Methodist church where the roses grew wild and nobody ever came during the week. That place became our world. No money, no class lines, no Harrison last name hanging over my head like a warning sign. With James, I felt seen. He asked my opinions. He laughed at my jokes. He wanted to know my dreams, not the polite kind you tell strangers, but the real ones. I told him I wanted to be a teacher, to stand in front of a classroom and matter to kids who needed someone to believe in them. "You'd be amazing," he said, like it was a fact, not a compliment. That should have been my first red flag. Men like James weren't raised to admire dreams. They were raised to own outcomes. Still, we kept meeting. Weeks turned into months, summer burned into fall, leaves crunching under our feet while we whispered about futures that didn't exist yet. I knew his parents would never accept me. Everybody in town knew it. The Harrisons didn't mix blood with grocery store daughters. But James talked big. "I'll handle them," he said, confidence dripping from every word. "My father needs me. He won't risk losing me over this." That confidence? It wasn't courage. It was privilege talking. Then one October afternoon, with dry leaves spinning around us like fate was listening, James did the unthinkable. "I want to marry you, Dorothy." Just like that. My knees actually shook. My brain screamed, "This isn't real." I reminded him of his family, of the town, of the mess it would cause. "I don't care," he said, squeezing my hands. "I want you, period." And I believed him. A week later, James walked into my father's grocery store wearing a suit worth more than everything we owned combined. Roses in hand, voice calm, polite, respectful. My mother dropped a dish towel. My father forgot how to breathe. By nightfall, the whole town knew. Some folks were happy for me. Others whispered ugly things, that I trapped him, that I was pregnant, that I was after money. The thing that surprised me most? My sister Beatrice hugged me tight and said she was proud. But her eyes stayed cold. James's parents exploded exactly like I expected. Threats, screaming, talk of disownment. His mother took to bed like she'd been personally attacked by God himself. James stood firm, or at least pretended to. In the end, the Harrisons agreed on one condition. The wedding had to be massive, public, loud, untouchable. They refused to look ashamed. Suddenly, I was being dragged through New York boutiques, jewelers, fittings I didn't recognize myself in. People calling me future Mrs. Harrison like I was a title, not a person. My mother warned me quietly one night while helping me try on a dress that cost more than our house. "Don't forget who you are. Money changes people." I smiled, I nodded, and ignored her, because when you're young and in love, you don't believe warnings, you believe promises. I thought marrying him meant stepping into a fairy tale. I didn't realize I was walking straight into a gilded cage. The wedding happened in January of 1960, right in the dead of winter, but you wouldn't have known it from the way Millerville dressed itself up. The Methodist church was packed wall to wall, dripping in white orchids shipped in from who knows where. Flowers alone probably cost more than my father made in a year. I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like an exhibit. My dress came from a famous New York designer, 10-foot train, French lace veil, jewelry pulled from the Harrison family vault, pieces with history, weight, expectations. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked rich, polished, perfect. She didn't look happy. The town showed up in full force. Folks who used to buy canned beans from my dad now whispered my name like it was a headline. Politicians, businessmen, people who never said hello to me in their lives suddenly wanted to shake my hand. I smiled until my face hurt. My parents sat stiff in the pews, clearly uncomfortable. My mother clutched her purse like armor. My father kept his hands folded, jaw tight, pride and fear wrestling inside him. Beatrice looked stunning, calm, confident, almost glowing. Too glowing. I noticed it then, but didn't understand it yet. At the reception, held at the country club, everything sparkled. Crystal glasses, live orchestra, 500 guests I didn't know and never would. James floated through the room like he was born for it, laughing, shaking hands, slapping backs. And me? I was introduced, reintroduced, displayed. "This is my wife," he said over and over. "Not Dorothy, my wife." His smile didn't reach his eyes. That's when my chest tightened for the first time, a quiet warning, a whisper I ignored. The honeymoon saved me from that feeling, at least for a while. Paris felt unreal, streets glowing at night, cafes, museums, hand-holding like teenagers. James was attentive again, charming, warm, the man I fell for behind the church. I convinced myself the wedding stress had messed with him, that once real life started, things would settle. They didn't. When we came back, reality hit hard. The mansion wasn't ours. It belonged to his parents. 7 bedrooms, staff everywhere, a house so big it echoed when I walked alone. And his mother? She showed up daily, inspected everything, corrected everything, controlled everything. I wasn't allowed to cook or clean or choose meals. The weekly menu was decided without me. I went from working beside my mother every day to sitting alone in a house full of people who didn't answer to me. James left before sunrise, came home after dark. When I told him I felt lonely, he looked confused, genuinely confused. "But you have everything," he said. "The house, the clothes, the life." That's when I realized something terrifying. He thought things replaced purpose. My dreams, teaching, making a difference. He never heard them. Over time, I shrank, became quiet, learned what to say at dinners, what not to say, learned how to smile without feeling anything at all. Then came the questions. When are we having a baby? The Harrisons need an heir, a boy preferably. Months passed, no pregnancy. Doctors, tests, teas, prayers, hope turning to pressure. And James? He grew colder. Intimacy became mechanical, scheduled, purpose-driven. And my mother-in-law, she started inviting young women to lunch, pretty ones, fertile ones. I served tea and pretended not to notice while pieces of me broke off quietly inside. I thought losing myself was the worst part. I had no idea humiliation was about to walk right through the front door. 3 years into my marriage, everything finally snapped. Not with a scream, not with a slap, but with a wine stain. It was a Sunday lunch at my in-laws' house, one of those stiff, suffocating gatherings where everyone pretends to like each other and nobody actually breathes. The table was laid out like a museum exhibit, fine china, polished silverware, and a white linen tablecloth my mother-in-law treated like a family relic. James sat at the head of the table, confident as ever. His parents flanked him like royalty. My parents sat across from me, quiet, trying not to look uncomfortable. And then there was Beatrice, seated closer to James than necessary, laughing a little too easily at his jokes. I noticed it, I felt it, I ignored it. By then, I'd learned survival meant silence. Lunch dragged on. Politics, business talk, things women weren't invited into. I drank more wine than usual just to get through it. When I stood up to help serve dessert, my hand shook. A few drops of red wine splashed onto the white tablecloth. That's it. That was the crime. The room went dead quiet. My mother-in-law sighed like I'd committed treason. James didn't even look at me at first, just clenched his jaw. Then he snapped. "Besides not being able to give me a child, you're clumsy too," he said, tossing his napkin down. "You're useless." Useless. The word hit harder than any slap ever could. Then came the sentence that stopped time. "If you don't give me a child by the end of this year, I'll marry your sister." I swear the air left the room. I searched faces for outrage, for defense, for something. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in one breath. My mother cried silently, hands trembling. My mother-in-law nodded, actually nodded, like this was a reasonable solution. And Beatrice? She almost smiled. Something inside me cracked so cleanly, it felt surgical. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't run. I bent down, picked up the fallen napkin, cleaned the wine stain. Then I spoke, calm as ice. "Dessert is served. Apple pie, house specialty." And I served them, every last one. That night, the mansion felt colder than ever. James locked himself in his office with a bottle. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting cracks like they were answers. Stay and keep dying slowly, or leave and risk everything. By morning, I knew. I dressed simply, one of the few dresses I chose myself. No jewelry, no makeup. I asked the driver to take me to the factory. "I want to surprise my husband," I said. Even the driver knew better. When I walked into the building, people avoided my eyes. The receptionist stuttered, papers shuffled, silent screamed. I didn't knock on James's office door. I opened it, and there they were. My husband, my sister. Too close, too familiar, no confusion necessary. Beatrice looked annoyed, not guilty. James adjusted his tie like I was the inconvenience. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "Working?" I said quietly. "Is that what you call this now?" He told me to go home, said we'd talk later. There wasn't going to be a later. I took off my wedding ring, set it on his desk. "It's over." He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "You're nothing without me," he hissed. I looked him dead in the eye. "I'd rather be nothing than this." And I walked out. Rehook, end of part 4. I thought leaving him would be the hardest part. I didn't know the real fight was just beginning.
James didn't chase me down the factory hallway. He didn't beg. He didn't apologize. He just let go. And that scared me more than anything else. Outside, the driver waited by the car like nothing unusual had happened. I slid into the back seat, my hands shaking so hard I had to sit on them. "Home, ma'am?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. My voice surprised even me. "Take me to the bus station." He hesitated. Everyone in Millerville knew what that meant. Leaving without a plan, leaving without a plan, leaving him. But he nodded and drove. As the car rolled through town, I watched my whole life pass by the window. The church where I married the wrong man, the square where I first fell in love, and then my father's grocery store. He was behind the counter, smiling at a customer like the world hadn't shattered his daughter. I almost told the driver to stop. Almost. But I knew if I did, James would find me before sunset, not out of love, out of pride. At the bus station, I thanked the driver. He didn't say much, just looked at me with a kind of quiet respect I hadn't felt in years. I bought a ticket without asking where it was headed. Pittsburgh. I sat in my fine dress, purse on my lap, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my ribs. The bus smelled like dust and old vinyl. Nothing glamorous, nothing safe, and yet I felt free. As the bus pulled away, I realized I had almost nothing. No luggage, no jewelry, just a little cash and my ID. But I'd left something far more valuable behind: fear. The ride lasted all night. I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying James's words, "You're nothing without me." By sunrise, I decided something. I'd rather be nothing on my own terms. When the bus rolled into Pittsburgh, the city looked rough, loud, alive. Steel mills, people moving fast with places to be. Nobody cared who I was, and that felt like a blessing. I asked an older woman for directions to St. Paul's Cathedral. She smiled and pointed uphill. "Can't miss it, dear." I climbed that hill with legs that felt like jelly. That's when I saw her, a thin woman with white hair and kind eyes, carrying flowers. "Excuse me," I asked softly, "do you know Martha Wilson?" Her face lit up. "Of course I do. She's my neighbor." 10 minutes later, I stood in front of a small yellow house with blue windows, and when Aunt Martha opened the door, she gasped. "You look just like your mother," she said. I broke. Inside that little house, with the smell of coffee and lavender, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I told her everything, every insult, every betrayal, every bruise I pretended didn't hurt. She didn't interrupt. She just held my hands. "You did the right thing," she said when I finished. "You can stay as long as you need." That night, lying in a narrow bed under a handmade quilt, something strange happened. Hope. And then something else, a thought. My body felt different. Nausea, a missed cycle I'd blamed on stress. I placed a hand on my stomach, heart racing. After all the years of being called barren, what if I wasn't? I fell asleep with that question burning in my chest. I ran from a marriage that broke me. I didn't know I was carrying the reason I'd survive. 2 weeks later, the truth landed like a thunderclap. I was pregnant. The midwife, Mrs. Sarah, said it calmly, like she was telling me the weather. About 2 months along, she added, adjusting her glasses, strong heartbeat. Strong. I laughed and cried at the same time, hands shaking so badly Aunt Martha had to steady me. For years, I'd been poked, tested, whispered about, labeled broken, barren, useless. And now that I'd walked away, life showed up uninvited. If irony had a sense of humor, this was it. Joy hit first, real chest-burning joy. Then fear followed right behind it. James. His name alone tightened my throat. What would happen if he found out? What would he do if he realized the heir he demanded so cruelly was real and no longer his to control? Aunt Martha thawed on my face. "We'll be smart," she said firmly, "not scared." She helped me write a short letter to my mother. No address, no details, just that I was safe,
alive, free. A mother doesn't sleep until she knows that much. Spring rolled in quietly. My body changed. Morning sickness knocked me flat some days. Other days, hunger came out of nowhere. Aunt Martha cared for me like I was her own daughter. Teas, soups, patience I didn't feel I deserved. And for the first time in my life, I worked with my hands for myself. Aunt Martha took in sewing work from neighbors. I helped. Hemming, repairs, small dresses. The money wasn't much, but it was honest, and something strange happened. I was good at it, really good. Each stitch felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then the letter came from my mother. James had gone to a judge. He claimed I abandoned him, claimed the marriage was never consummated, claimed I was incapable of bearing children. My knees buckled. If he won, my baby would have no name, no protection, no rights. James wasn't just trying to erase me, he was trying to rewrite reality. Aunt Martha didn't panic. She went to her bedroom and lifted a loose floorboard. Beneath it sat a small wooden box. Inside, antique jewelry. My mother's, she said quietly, for emergencies. The next day, we sold one piece and hired a lawyer named Mr. Anderson, retired, sharp, unafraid of big names. When he heard my story, he leaned back and nodded. He made a mistake, he said. He lied. James didn't know about the baby. That lie would cost him. The judge froze the annulment, ordered provisional support. For the first time, the law stood between me and him. But protection doesn't mean peace. James hired investigators. Men started asking questions. Mr. Anderson warned me, he'll find you eventually. I thought about running again, but then I felt the baby move. Just a flutter. Enough. I said, no, I'm done running. Summer came. Neighbors welcomed me. I met Gerald. Kind, respectful, no expectations, just help when I needed it. Humanity when I forgot it existed. Then another letter arrived from my mother. James had vanished. So had Beatrice. Together. Fate run. The factory was collapsing. Debts, fraud, lies finally catching up. For the first time since Millerville, I slept without fear. I thought escape was my victory. I didn't know justice was already chasing the people who hurt me. The news about James and Beatrice running off together spread fast, faster than gossip ever did when I was the one being judged. At first, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no heartbreak, just a deep, quiet relief, like someone finally shut off a loud machine that had been rattling my head for years. Mr. Anderson confirmed it a week later. James had likely fled the country, Mexico, maybe farther. The dairy factory was drowning in debt. Years of hidden fraud were surfacing, and the Harrison name, once untouchable, was suddenly poison. The empire collapsed almost overnight. His father suffered a stroke. His mother stopped hosting luncheons and started avoiding eye contact at church. The people who once bowed now whispered. Life has a way of flipping scripts. Meanwhile, my world grew smaller and stronger. My belly rounded, my baby kicked like she was reminding me she was still here, still fighting. Sewing work picked up fast. One happy customer turned into 3. Dresses for weddings, church events, graduation parties. Each stitch was independence. Each dollar was proof. One afternoon, Mr. Anderson arrived with documents in hand and a rare smile on his face. Legal separation approved, he said, on grounds of abandonment. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. I wasn't Mrs. Harrison anymore. I was Dorothy Wilson again.
Then my parents finally came to visit. My father cried when he saw my belly. Big, quiet tears, the kind men don't admit to. My mother brought baby clothes she'd sewn herself, folded like treasure. That's when I learned the full truth. Beatrice had given birth to a boy and then abandoned him. She chose James, chose escape, chose fantasy over responsibility. My parents were raising the baby. 2 cousins, same father, a secret heavy enough to crush grown hearts, so we buried it for the children's sake. Mercy matters. December came early. Pain woke me before sunrise. Labor. The house filled with urgency. Mrs. Sarah arrived like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Hours blurred into heat, breath, and willpower, and then a cry, strong, defiant, alive. They placed my daughter in my arms, and the world stopped. "Claire," I whispered, "you're Claire." Light after darkness. She had dark hair like mine, James's eyes maybe, but her spirit all her own. Motherhood stripped me raw and rebuilt me better. Sleepless nights, doubt, love so fierce it scared me. Aunt Martha stayed my anchor. My parents visited often. The house felt full, not of luxury, but of belonging. My sewing became a business. Wilson Atelier. Small, honest, mine. By the time Claire turned 1, I rented a tiny shop downtown, painted the sign myself, worked while she napped, lived on coffee and determination. Hard, yes. Worth it, every second. Then, in 1968, a letter came. Beatrice was back, sick, alone, abandoned, just like she abandoned her child. She asked about me, about Claire. I stared at the letter for days. Forgiveness isn't easy. It's heavier than anger. But Claire had changed me. I wrote back. I said, "I'll listen." That's all I promise. 2 weeks later, my sister stepped off a train looking nothing like the girl who stole my husband. Broken, human. And for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Not rage, not satisfaction, but the weight of a choice only survivors get to make. I thought my story was about betrayal. I didn't know the final test would be forgiveness. When Beatrice stepped off that train in Pittsburgh, I barely recognized her. The woman standing in front of me wore the bones of my sister, but not the soul. Her shoulders slumped forward like she was bracing against an invisible storm. Her hair, once the thing everyone noticed first, hung dull and thin. Her eyes didn't shine anymore. They searched carefully, like someone expecting rejection before a word is spoken. She looked emptied. I stood still, my daughter Claire balanced on my hip, watching Beatrice take us in. Her eyes locked onto the baby first, not me. "She's beautiful," Beatrice whispered. I nodded, nothing more. We walked home in silence. The house felt smaller with her inside, like it remembered what had happened between us. Aunt Martha offered her tea, like kindness was still a rule worth following, because it was. Beatrice's hands shook so badly the cup rattled against the saucer. "I lost everything," she said finally. "James took the money and ran, left me in Mexico with nothing. I got sick, had to beg for help." I listened. I didn't interrupt. She told me about sleeping in cheap rooms, about realizing the man she chose never loved anyone, not me, not her, not even his own son. She cried when she spoke about the baby. "I didn't deserve him," she sobbed. "I know that now." I wanted to scream, to remind her of the lunch table, of James's threat, of her silence. But Claire stirred in my arms, soft and warm and innocent. Anger teaches nothing. I can't give you forgiveness today, I said honestly. That I can give you honesty. Beatrice nodded. She didn't argue, she didn't beg. That alone told me she changed. She stayed a few days, helped where she could, cleaned, cooked, watched Claire with a sadness that felt more like punishment than jealousy. When she left, she hugged me like she didn't expect to be allowed to. I don't want your life, she said quietly. I just want to become someone who doesn't destroy everything she touches. After she was gone, the house felt peaceful again. Life moved forward. My business grew. I hired help, designed my own dresses. The Wilson name became associated with quality, not gossip. Claire grew fast, curious, strong-willed, bright. She laughed easily, trusted deeply. Everything I once lost and rebuilt. Then, one afternoon, years later, a letter arrived from a government office. James Harrison was dead. Car accident, foreign highway, no family present. I felt nothing. No tears, no relief, just closure. His shadow disappeared that day. I stood in my shop window watching Claire play outside and understood something clearly for the first time. I survived him. I outgrew him. And the woman I became, she wouldn't have existed without the fire. Some stories end with revenge. Mine ended with peace. I thought my life was defined by what I lost. I didn't know it would be defined by what I chose to become. By the time Claire turned 10, our life no longer felt like recovery. It felt like normal, the kind earned, not inherited. The shop stayed busy. Dresses for weddings, church events, graduations. Women trusted me with their big moments, and I never took that lightly. Every stitch carried my name now, not as someone's wife, not as someone's scandal, but as Dorothy Wilson, full stop. Claire grew up in the back of that shop. She did homework under cutting tables, played with fabric scraps, learned early that hands create futures. She had my stubborn streak and Aunt Martha's patience, a dangerous but powerful mix. People asked about her father sometimes. I kept it simple. He wasn't meant to stay. That was enough. When Aunt Martha passed, peacefully in her sleep, I thought my heart would shatter again. But grief doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it seals what matters. She left me the house, left Claire her quilt, left me a lesson that still guides me. Kindness isn't weakness, it's choice. Years passed. Claire became a young woman, smart, independent, unafraid to speak. When she left for college, my shop window felt too quiet for a while. Then one evening, Claire sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked the question I'd been preparing for my whole life. "Mom, who was my father?" I didn't panic. I told her the truth, not the cruelty, not the violence, just the facts. That he wasn't strong enough, that he chose power over love, that he lost everything that mattered. She listened, she didn't cry. "I'm glad you left," she said. "I wouldn't want to be raised by fear." That's when I knew I'd done right by her. As I got older, the world changed, laws changed, women changed, but pain, that stayed familiar. I saw younger women walk into my shop carrying stories that looked too much like mine. I never judged, I listened, and sometimes listening saved them. Now at 83, I sit by the window most mornings with my coffee, watching the sun climb like it always does, no matter how dark the night was before. Life doesn't reward everyone fairly.
but it gives you choices. And sometimes choosing yourself is the bravest thing you'll ever do. If you're listening to this and standing at a crossroads, unsure, scared, tired, remember this. You don't need permission to leave what's breaking you. You don't need approval to rebuild, and you don't need revenge to heal. You just need courage and one step forward. Some people survive storms. Others learn how to become the calm after them. I never planned to become anyone's safe place, but life has a funny way of turning pain into purpose, whether you ask for it or not. By my late 40s, Wilson Atelier wasn't just a dress shop anymore. It was something else. Women didn't just come in for fittings. They came in to breathe, to sit, to talk, sometimes to cry quietly while pretending to browse fabrics. At first, I didn't notice the pattern. A woman would linger after a fitting, fingers trembling while adjusting a hem that didn't need adjusting. Another would ask my opinion, not about a dress, but about leaving, about starting over, about whether life really ended after walking away. I never gave speeches, never pretended to have perfect answers. I just told the truth. I was scared too. I didn't know how I'd survived. I survived anyway. That honesty did more than advice ever could. One afternoon, a young woman named Lena came in with bruises she tried to hide under long sleeves. Her fiancé was wealthy, important, respected. "He says no one would believe me," she whispered. I looked at her and saw myself at 30. I told her something I wish someone had told me sooner. Power only works when silence protects it. She left that day without buying anything. A week later, she came back, smiling, free. Word spread quietly, not through ads or signs, but through survival, through women telling other women, "Go see Dorothy, she won't judge you." I never charged for listening, and somehow the shop never lacked money. Claire watched all of this happen. By then, she was grown, confident, brilliant in ways that made my chest swell with pride. She studied business and design, then came home and said, "Mom, we could do more." She wasn't talking about money. We expanded, hired women who needed second chances, single mothers, widows, women rebuilding from ashes. Wilson Atelier became something bigger than fabric and thread. It became proof. Years later, Claire took over most of the business. She modernized it, took it online, expanded to other cities, that she kept one rule unchanged. We hire hearts before resumes. Watching her lead felt like watching a wound heal generations forward. Now, in my 80s, I don't work the machines anymore. My hands ache too much, but I still sit in the shop sometimes, still listen, still remind women they're not crazy for wanting better. Some days, Claire catches me staring out the window and asks what I'm thinking. "The girl I used to be," I tell her. She didn't know she'd survive. And that's the truth. I thought my story ended when I escaped. I didn't know it was just the beginning of who I'd help save. One quiet morning, long after the world thought my story was finished, a letter arrived that brought the past knocking again. It wasn't from James. It wasn't from Beatrice. It was from a law office in another country. James had died years earlier. That much I already knew. But what I didn't know was that he'd left behind debts, lies, and a paper trail messier than his soul. Among those papers was one detail that made my hands tremble. He had acknowledged Claire privately. Not publicly, not proudly, but legally. It meant she had a claim, not just to money, but to truth. Claire sat across from me as I read the letter out loud. She was calm, too calm. "So he knew," she said, "and still ran?" "Yes," I answered softly. She didn't ask for inheritance. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked one question that mattered. "Do you regret not telling me sooner?" I thought about it carefully. "No," I said, "because you grew up free." And that was the truth. Claire declined everything tied to his name. She didn't want blood money. She wanted distance. That's when I realized something important. Trauma ends when someone chooses differently. I thought the past was buried. I didn't know it would resurface just to prove we'd already won. Age doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. By 70, I stopped apologizing for my story. I stopped softening the truth for people who preferred comfort over reality. I learned that love without respect is just control wearing perfume. That silence isn't peace, it's permission. And that leaving doesn't mean failure. Sometimes it means survival. Women still stop me on the street. Some recognize me. Some just feel safe enough to talk. They ask, "How did you know when to leave?" I always give the same answer. When staying cost me myself. Time doesn't erase pain. It teaches you how to carry it without letting it crush you. I didn't grow stronger by forgetting. I grew stronger by remembering and choosing better. People think legacy is money, property, last names carved into stone. They're wrong. My legacy is Claire, and every woman who learned she wasn't crazy. Every child raised without fear. Every choice made with courage instead of silence. Wilson Atelier still stands, now run fully by Claire. It hires women who once believed their lives were over. Every dress carries a quiet message. You are allowed to start again. That's the inheritance that matters. I didn't pass down wealth. I passed down freedom. If you're hearing my voice right now, this part is for you. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe you've been told you're too much or not enough. Listen carefully. You don't need to be perfect to leave. You don't need permission to choose peace. You don't need to explain your survival to anyone. I was 30 when I ran with nothing. I was terrified, and it saved my life. If an 83-year-old woman could reach back through time, I'd take my younger self by the hands and say this: it gets better the moment you choose yourself. And now I'm saying it to you. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs courage today. And remember, even after the darkest night, morning still comes. Thank you for listening to our journey. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We'd love to know, what would you have done in my place? Tell us in the comments.